So we are here
Yes.
to talk about our TEDx experience,
Oh
which
my
was
goodness.
really interesting
Yeah.
and awesome, but it's a little intense.
Absolutely.
So you did yours first, and I remember we had brunch actually as you were preparing and practicing. And what was the experience like
I
for
was
you?
terrified.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep for like a month. I
Oh
thought
my
about it
gosh.
like every single day. I practiced a lot, but I never felt like it was enough. It was completely different from any
Yeah.
academic talk I've ever given. And
How
I
so?
think because it was to an audience that I didn't know,
Right.
and I didn't have notes.
That was big.
You
Yeah.
know, there were no notes, and I had to go off the cuff, and there were bright lights, and it was the most terrifying experience, one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of it being different, I think it was just, I needed to be very clear on my story, and that's important for academic talks. But I needed to be able to loop you in and make sure that you understood the story, but also be interesting and engaging as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And I felt the pressure to be interesting and engaging in ways that I don't necessarily feel in academic talks.
Yeah.
What about you? How was your experience?
Similar. I mean, I'm a late planner, so
Yeah.
I wasn't as prepared.
Yeah.
I wasn't really off book until the morning of the talk,
Yeah.
which was terrifying because was I really off book? I didn't know
Yeah.
until I really walked onto the stage.
Yeah.
But similarly, like it felt like a lot of pressure. It was a huge audience. I didn't know who the audience was. I was speaking with other people who were doing really amazing things, and they were backstage terrified too,
Yeah.
right? And so it was we were sort of feeding on
Yeah.
each other. But I felt like the crew I worked with for TEDx RVA were really professional. They're performers. They've worked in this space quite a bit, and I felt like there's one guy, Todd in particular, who's sort of over all the back scene stuff,
Yeah.
and he gave me this major pep talk right
Yeah.
before I went on, and I really needed it. It
Yeah.
calmed me down. It sort of centered me.
Yeah.
And I remember walking on the stage, and I remember walking off of the stage. I know.
Those 15 minutes were just
15
gone.
minutes in between. I'll have to watch the video later.
Oh my goodness.
But it was an amazing experience. But the
Yeah.
same thing about storytelling.
Yeah.
I'm not a storyteller in that way. And for me, this felt like a blend of personal and academic
Yeah.
in a way that I wasn't fully comfortable with.
Yeah.
I wasn't fully comfortable with sharing my personal life and emotions and
Yeah.
keeping it together, but
Yeah.
not coming across as robotic and
Sure.
not coming across as professor. Keeping that balance. It was
Yeah.
really hard to do.
And I think what's different about this experience is that TEDx has like this history,
Yeah.
and people kind of know what a TEDx experience should be like. And I think that going in, I kind of knew what to expect in terms of the types of kind of what it should look like, and I think that kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some really phenomenal
I know,
TEDx talks,
and
and I was like, I need to be like that.
And I made the mistake of watching my favorites. Like, yeah, I'm going to sound like her.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I needed to figure out was like, how to just be myself. Like, and the coaches that we had in TEDx Broadway were really kind of pointing it around like this. You need to just be yourself and
yeah.
kind of hone in on what makes you interesting and unique, and what makes your story interesting and unique. So I spent a lot of time trying to like come outside of the research and then look at it as a person who knows nothing about it. And so
that's interesting.
That took a moment. That wasn't something that kind of came naturally
You've
as
been
a
away
researcher.
from it for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
I watched yours, and I really liked how you brought us back to the human beings. And I feel like you do this in your research talks as well, but you really got into the personal narratives of the people you study, the individuals you study, which is really important, I think, when you do machine learning, computational types of approaches where you have lots and lots of data, but ultimately these are individuals. These are individual narratives and stories, and I thought you did a wonderful job. bringing that out in your
Thank
in your
you.
talk.
No, that's really helpful because I didn't know if that was
You
coming
were hitting
across or not.
so how did you decide on the story? How did you decide on?
You know, I talked a lot with my team, so I
Okay.
think something that's really important in doing these talks is to have a team of people. So talking to you and then talking to people in my research lab about, like, what do we do? Like, you really have to get to the story. Like, you do all these different projects, and at times they feel like you're just moving along and doing a bunch of different
Checking
things.
the boxes type
Checking
of thing.
boxes. This made me focus on what's the main story and why is this important? Why should people care about my work?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that was not the easiest thing to do because I felt like there's a lot of things that I think people should care about. But I had to step outside of myself and think about other people who are not connected to research.
Yeah.
You know, who was the mom in the South that might watch this video and think about their own kids' lives on social media.
Yeah.
So that really helped. And so I talked about a young woman that I've been studying for the past 4 years. That has really been the anchor of my research.
What's your name again?
Jakara Barnes.
Jakara Barnes, yeah.
And she's really interesting in that she's a young woman who was super gang involved and had a great presence on Twitter. And so I really talked about her life and kind of how I had to check my own biases in thinking about her because I went into this research thinking about her as this tough woman that was doing all this violence, and I was going to identify all these threatening words and phrases, and then I found something completely different. I found a young woman that was hurting and in pain and experienced a lot of trauma, and so that really became the crux of my TEDx experience.
Yeah. I thought it was such a compelling point to raise because you were really sort of bringing out the point that it doesn't matter who you are when you're observing and gazing on someone else's life. There can be a tendency to not allow complexity in that life, right? To reduce them to convenient notions about who you think they are. And you really brought out in your talk, seeing human beings and doing justice to those lives is complicated. And it takes a lot of effort. And to acknowledge your own tendency to do that, I thought was really important for people. It helped connect, right? It helped the people in the audience say, he's not just talking at me, he's saying he's done the same thing and reducing people in a way that was problematic. And you checked yourself and you grew. And I think I thought that was important.
What I really liked about your talk is how you started off with your son. That just really kind of melted my heart. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about how you connected the work that you do with kind of the experience of raising your young Black son.
Yeah, I worked with a coach throughout the process, and same thing, like kept trying to find the story, and that's hard because as a researcher, as a scientist, you're used to presenting, being composed, sticking to the data. And I was being forced to step way outside of that, which I do with my friends, but I don't do on stage, right? Or I don't do with my public self in quite the same way. But it started with remembering, like I said in the talk, the day I learned that Trayvon Martin was killed. And I had a few close friends who were pregnant with Black boys, 3 female friends who were pregnant with Black boys who were just torn up. Right, just really struggling with this, and I think remembering that connected to me now being a mom and the worries that I have now. Right, since Trayvon for sure, there's certainly more coverage of these types of deaths, killings, and it really kind of forced me to share, I think, the significance of being the mother of a Black child and a Black boy in particular, and what that means. And it's not just my normal worries or my normal curiosities about who he'll be. I have to worry about him in a completely different way. And I was trying to connect with the audience. I was trying to connect the audience to not everyone has to do that. And that's not fair. Right? And not only is that not fair, it's killing us. Right? That is a stress that I have to worry about on top of everything else that's taking a toll on my life, that's independent of my social class, right? And so that's where I started, because it really is the root of the virtual reality project that I'm doing, which is some people don't get it. They think they get it, and they don't. And how can we help move them closer to understanding an experience that's just not their own, a social reality that's not their own?
So your project is super cool. I love talking about it and telling everyone about your project. You're a social worker, you're a developmental psychologist. How did you get into VR? How did that happen?
I don't know. It's so funny because when I first wrote the proposal for funding for this project, I had never used virtual reality. I'm like, this sounds good. Let's give it a shot, right? But I made this wonderful connection with a scholar at Stanford, and you know, who's really supporting the virtual reality, the technical side of things, so it's been this really wonderful collaboration. But it really started with me thinking about the effects of media on health. So the laboratory-based work that I do, where I expose people to different types of media, and I monitor their physiological responses and other types of stress responses. And it made me wonder not only about the negative effects of media, but it made me start to think about how can we flip and create counter narratives through media. How can I leverage media and technology? And that's when I started thinking about ways to do that. And I actually started off thinking about video games. But some of the data that I was looking at initially suggests that playing a game can actually shift attitudes in the opposite direction that you want them to. So that's what sort of moved me to virtual reality, right? Again, not really knowing what that means, but I'm like, yes, reality, not game, right? But really thinking about how can I create realistic experiences for you to walk in someone else's shoes in this virtual space and experience nuances and complexities that you may not otherwise understand or really connect to until it feels like it's happening to you or to someone you care about. So that's sort of the trajectory to getting to the virtual reality project.
Did your TEDx experience, has it influenced your thoughts moving forward about your research? Were you able to connect with people, or did the experience with the audience in any way kind of impact your thoughts moving forward?
It has, and I wonder if it was similar for you, because I've had to think about the importance of connecting outside of academia, and that's a really tough balance for us, right? That we're not, my TEDx talk won't count towards my tenure in any sort of substantive way, but it's impactful, right? I spoke to an audience of 1,800 people for 15 minutes who were only looking and talking and listening to me. That's a possibility for substantial impact. And in that audience, you have people working at federal agencies, nonprofits, community organizations who are talking about the significance of this work to what they do and wanting to connect. So it's clear that those types of audiences are really important to engage, but if we're not rewarded for them in terms of our professional lives, it's this really tough balance. But it's one that I'm willing to take on because I think it's so important. So engagement through media, again, media is powerful, and engaging audiences outside of academia. I think the TEDx really brought home how important that is. And I do feel like it's shifting. I do think that academia is taking other types of impact into consideration more, but it's not really formalized yet. And it's sort of a case-by-case basis. So you don't really know where the mark is in the way that you know what types of journals you need to publish in and how many papers you need to have and what types of grants you need to get. This sort of public impact piece is a little ambiguous. And I've also seen it work both ways. I've seen it work in people's favor and I've seen it work against them.
Absolutely.
And there is this tension between, are you out there sort of just talking and sharing your opinions? Is it really backed up by research and science? Is it rooted in the research and science? Because that's different. That's valuable, but it's different than being an academic. And so not crossing that line is really hard to do when you start to engage public audiences.
And I think what's important to note is that a lot of our research kind of stays within these small communities, right? So we publish in these journals and a very small community of people are reading our work, right? But doing TEDx talks allows us to reach a multitude of people from various backgrounds who can be directly impacted
very quickly
by our work immediately, quickly could change policy and practices and procedures across the globe. But as we've noted, it's not something that is weighed heavily or at all in our tenure process. And so I think as we continue to think about impact, what does impact really look like, particularly in the 21st century, when we have these modes of technology that allow us to move across groups really
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah. So I do think it's a shift that's happening
Yeah.
in academia to account for this type of impact, but it's not formalized, and I think we still have a ways to go to sort of really account for the significance of this type of impact. Yeah. What about for you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I had this professor when I was at the University of Michigan who told me that doing good community work is how you'll get tenure. So if you really get focused on the communities that you want to impact, then that is your ticket to tenure. And that doing the TEDx talk reminded me of the importance of staying grounded with the community and having those voices as a part of the narratives that I'm trying to tell. And so after the talk is when we had this moment to interact with the audience members. And that was really helpful. I had people, so the people in the audience for me were all folks from Broadway.
Okay.
It was a space that I know nothing about. But these folks are really good at telling stories.
They are really good at telling stories. Right. That's what they do. That's
right.
what they do, yeah.
You know? And so that really helped me to think about, well, how do I want to tell this story in a way that is transformative, that is not just about, the research, but is about humanizing the lives of young kids of color who live in challenging community contexts.
Yeah.
And what are the elements of that story that are important? And how do you get those elements right and tell in an ethical way and really kind of use this to build on something really important? And having those conversations with people outside of my area, completely outside of my area, was extremely important.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's important. And I think something that was significant again is that it doesn't, what you're saying, what I'm saying, doesn't diminish the significance of research or the science. Absolutely not. But it's also saying that the research in a bubble, in a vacuum, is not useful to the world. It's not useful to society.
Yeah.
And engaging in these types of public spaces actually holds the research accountable.
Yeah.
Are you doing it right?
Right.
Are you doing it in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
Are you doing it in a way that's useful for communities?
Yeah.
Are you doing it in a way that's actually translatable?
Yeah.
Right? And you don't know that until you step outside of academia, right? Until you step outside the tower and have people hold you accountable for what you're saying, right?
So
it's one thing to
true.
present to people who are in your area, who think similarly, and it's quite another to present to an audience who will have no qualms about saying, that doesn't translate into my community.
Yeah.
I don't see how that works. I don't see how that applies.
Yeah.
Go back to the drawing board,
Yeah.
right? And so that didn't necessarily happen during the TEDx, but when you start to engage those spaces, that's what I would expect to see more and more.
Absolutely. So let's get real. Did you black out at all during
Oh my
the talk?
gosh. There was another guy who was backstage. He went before me, and we kind of, became buddies a little bit. And he was like, "I'm being held together with duct tape. I'm being held together with duct tape. Like, I'm just not fully functioning."
Yeah.
And I was right there with him. Like, I just felt on the brink of function.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I said I remember walking on the stage and I remember walking off, I really kind of blacked out for a minute, right? And it's just amazing. Somehow you walk on and it just clicks and you start to, you pull it together.
Yeah. So I completely blacked out. I think I had it together for like the first 2 minutes and then my mind went blank.
Oh my gosh.
But it was good because my sister came up from North Carolina to help me practice.
Yes, I remember,
And she was like, you need to practice messing up and being able to be
to
off
pull
script.
it together. Yeah.
And I was like, whatever. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And that came in
absolutely
handy
true.
because I was like, I knew that I had some words I could throw in there to keep it moving. And then that happened like mid-paragraph. And then I kept it moving and I felt better, but I totally blanked out because I was on an actual Broadway stage and the lights were blaring in my face, bright, and I felt the energy and then I just lost it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And that was my fear.
Yeah.
And I kind of had the sense that either I was going to nail it or completely go up in flames. Like there was not going to be an okay talk.
Right, no.
It wasn't going to be. It was either going to be good or like just total meltdown because I hadn't practiced enough to pull it together, right? And if I didn't get that sequence right, it felt like I was going to really just blow it all together and not be able to do what you did, which was to pull and practice pulling it together.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I skipped one section of my talk.
Yeah.
For the most part, I kept the threads.
Yeah.
Linking because if I hadn't, I'm not sure
No,
I would have been
I
able to
hear
pull it
you.
together. I didn't know
hear
it well
you.
enough to do that.
Now, tell me, do you check your views to see who's watching your videos?
So mine is not public yet.
Okay.
So I will though.
Okay. I check them almost every day.
Really?
I do.
Do you look at the comments?
I only have 4 comments, and I know everyone who
You know them.
commented.
Okay.
So I haven't, it hasn't blown up or anything like that, but
Okay.
I do check the views. But I really wish there was, if I were to change anything about TEDx, that there'd be this moment to really reflect on what I did and what people are thinking about in terms of what I said.
Yeah.
Really using this as a learning moment.
Yeah.
And there isn't like this talk back. Now, in my TEDx, we had, after each talk, there was a panel. And so there was, the moderator asked us a few questions about our talks, about our respective talks. But it wasn't really this time to dig in.
Yeah.
And so I wish there was some piece
That
with
would
the
be nice.
technology, either through YouTube or some other platform.
To continue the
engage
engagement.
the community.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we had 22 talks.
Wow.
There were 1,800 people
Goodness.
in the audience.
Yeah.
And we had these breaks in between.
Yeah.
Other than like a minute or so for like a couple of follow-up questions
Yeah.
after your talk, there wasn't a lot of space for engagement.
Yeah.
If you happen to be out at the breaks, people might grab you. But really, most people were just saying, "Oh, I loved your talk,"
Yeah.
or in sort of brief comments. So I agree, to
Yeah.
have that space to get their thoughts and feedback
Yeah.
would be nice.
Absolutely.
If there was some sort of formalized platform to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be really beneficial.
So, do you have any new fans?
I don't know. I've started a fan club just in case. I'm the only member right now. No, so my talk is not public yet, but even after the talk, people came up and said that a couple of people said they cried and were really moved and found it really touching, which was really important to me. So I'll consider them fans.
Yes.
But no, I haven't received any emails yet based on the live stream, and maybe I'll get more feedback after the link is available.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
What about you?
I don't know. It's hard to figure out like if people are like following me on Twitter because of the TEDx talk or other things.
Oh, I got some follows.
Yes,
Yeah, I got some follows.
yes, those are super important. But
Okay.
I do think there was some engagement. So one thing that I did in my talk is that I mentioned some famous folks. I mentioned people in the audience.
The Moonlight, director of Moonlight.
Yes, the Moonlight. I mentioned the African American movies
Viola
that came out. Viola
Davis.
Davis.
Yes.
And people really resonated with that. And so they were sharing those moments during the talk on Twitter. So that was really cool.
TEDx strategy.
Yeah. So it was really nice to connect with people in the Broward community.
Yeah, that's really interesting audience to present to.
Yeah. So would you do it again?
Yes, I do.
You hesitated for a moment.
I would do. I'm just remembering the feeling in my stomach before walking on the stage. We both love public speaking.
Yeah.
It's never a problem. But having to do a memorized talk in front of thousands of people, not something I do every day.
Yeah.
And so that was nerve-wracking and did not feel good right before I walked on.
Yeah.
Well, the entire time leading up to walking onto the stage. But I would do it again. I think I've done it now. And I have a sense of, I think for a couple of reasons. One, having to tell the type of story, as you were saying, was important for me to reconnect with the significance of my work and to reconnect with why my work is personal.
Sure.
And two, engaging a broad public audience is important to me, be that through TEDx or some other platform. I'm going to take the opportunities to do that seem to make sense for disseminating my work, in addition to disseminating my work in academic channels. So let me do it again. What about you?
Absolutely, I would do it again. I mean, I don't want to be held back by fear. I'm absolutely
terrified
about it, and I would be terrified again. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Yeah. But I think I'll have to put on Sasha Fierce character and kind of figure out
Beyonce it up. put it on.
Do what you have to do.
What you have to do.
I think I have benefited from this moment in March, right? So I've gotten additional emails from people across the country that have seen my talk. I've gotten opportunities to give additional talks that are not as scary as this one was. It's connected me to researchers across the country in ways I just never thought I would have the opportunity to do. And so it has been very beneficial for the research, for my career, but hopefully for this narrative. And that's really something I would like to measure is did this talk have any impact on how people are thinking about young kids of color and their experiences?
Yeah.
You know, in my work, I talk about Chicago a lot. Chicago's always in the news about its challenges with violence. Can these talks at all have put any dent in the narratives and the stories that are spun about these communities? And that's what I really hope. And so if I ever do the talk again, I would really want to push this agenda forward in that space.
Yeah.
You know?
I think we share that, right? Because even in the virtual reality project, I'm talking about people's understanding matters. And you're saying the same thing, right? How you understand these social issues, how you understand lives that are not your own are really important, right? They shape how you engage, they shape how you vote, they shape what policies you support, they shape how you live and behave in your own life.
Absolutely.
And so I think I didn't really recognize that as a common thread in what we do, but it's really, really important.
Absolutely.
And I think the engagement through these types of stories, through this type of storytelling, is an important element of doing that. It's not always, I actually say this in the talk, you know, the data lands in some ways, and in some ways it doesn't, right? Sometimes you need an emotional connection, a personal connection. You need heartstrings to be pulled in order for movement to be seen in terms of people's understanding. But I also make the point, and I think this relates to your work as well, is that it's not just about empathy, it's not just about heartstrings, it's not just about feeling bad, it's about acting differently. Are you living your life differently as a result of this emotional, you know, upswell that we've hopefully created? And I think that's an important part as well.
Absolutely. I want to backtrack for a moment. Like, tell me about the moment that you got the invitation, and what did you think, and how did you process that?
So it's funny because people are like, how'd you get to do a TEDx talk? It's not that magical. I have a friend who's on the committee. We were in the same postdoctoral program, and we did a leadership workshop together.
Got it.
And I told her about the virtual reality project, and she messaged me, you know, a couple of months later and was like, you know, I remember you talking about this project. Would you be interested in presenting it? And I interviewed with a committee, and they invited me to do it. And I don't think it really set in at that moment, because it's not a TED talk, it's a TEDx talk, which is an important distinction. But it's still the same realm of things. But I don't think that really set in until I got closer to the date. So for me, I'm like a day-by-day type of person, like just getting by. So like, for instance, I bought a plane ticket for next week yesterday. So the TEDx was, I agreed to do it, then it's sort of on the list, and I have to do other things, and I wasn't really able to sit in and focus until I was really like, I would meet with my coach. But really a few weeks leading up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is happening, and I haven't even like fully gone through this talk. So it was exciting and exhilarating, but it took a while to sort of get there.
No, I hear
What about you? So
I got a random email. Someone had seen an interview that I did, and they reached out and they thought the work that I was doing was interesting, and we had a series of conversations. So I would consider those to be interviews. And so there were two people that have been doing TEDx Broadway for about the past 6 years, and I spoke with both of them over a period of a few weeks, and then it was clear that they liked the story and the narrative that I was going to talk about, and then we went forward. And much like you, I kind of put it off. Like I think the thing is we're engaged in this research, and so that was a part of the story anyway, so it's not like we completely put it off the shelf. But I came back to it maybe with like the last month before the actual date. And I was terrified the entire month. The entire month. But I think that I didn't know what to expect. You know, I've seen these talks before, but I didn't know what to expect, and didn't know how I was going to experience it. But it ended up being a really good thing. So. You
know, I'm really good at playing it cool. Keyword, playing it cool.
Take it till you make it.
But we had a rehearsal the day before, and I wasn't off book, and I was frantically trying to be memorized before I got to this rehearsal, and I just wasn't. So, and I'm the type of person who can't use notes when I speak because I just kind of flow. And if I use notes, it starts to slow me down and it gets choppy. But I had to use notes because I just was not off book. So in this rehearsal, kind of looking down at my notes and kind of fumbling around, I'm like, I promise, guys, I'll have this together by tomorrow, magically. But it was leading up the night before when I was rehearsing for the rehearsal. I couldn't play it cool anymore. It's when it really, really hit home. And it carried into the next day. But it's amazing how you can psych yourself up and pull it together.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, because I really just enjoyed your TEDx talk, and I watched it live,
Thank
and the experience that I had watching you was just like one of like pride, and I was just like I had my friends watching it, and we were all just like very much connected to what you were doing. And I know your research, and I know what you do, and we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But to watch you do it and to experience your emotion in that process was everything for me. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'm really glad that we got to share that experience together.
Yeah. And do you know, like, I know Heidi Allen is doing one
Right.
coming up.
Yeah.
Which will be awesome.
Of course.
But again, like to see your friends on stage, people you know and connect with personally and professionally,
Right.
to see them take on this task, I think is really, really awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know other academics who have done talks, like TEDx type talks?
No, not a lot.
Yeah, some of them I've watched. Like, I know people who were faculty. I don't know them, but I know they were in like academic positions when they did the TEDx talk. And I wonder if they had similar experiences. I don't know. We'll have to check in with Heidi after she
Absolutely.
does hers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.